My name is Scarlett. I'm 36 years old. People often ask why I don't talk to my family anymore. I usually just smile and change the subject because how do you explain years of silence born from a lifetime of being invisible? The truth is, I didn't stop talking to them one day. They stopped seeing me long before that. I was 8 years old when everything changed. That was the day my mother came home from the hospital carrying my baby brother Marcus. He was wrapped in a soft blue blanket, tiny and quiet. My father stood beside her chest, puffed out with pride. I still remember the smell of antiseptic and baby powder mixed in the air and my mother's sharp perfume. I had drawn a picture that morning, me, mom, and dad holding hands with a little space left empty for the new baby. I wanted to give it to her as a gift, but she didn't even glance at it. From that day on, it was as if I had turned invisible. Mom would hold Marcus like he was a miracle, whispering to him in soft tones she never used with me. My father, who used to ask about my school or my drawings, suddenly had no time for such things. Go help your mother, he'd say. Be a good sister. I tried to be. I really did. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. When Marcus turned 9, he got a brand new laptop. I was 17 then, trying to write my final paper on an old computer that wheezed like a dying animal. When I complained that it froze every 5 minutes, my mother said flatly, "Well, if you worked harder, maybe you'd afford a new one yourself." Then she smiled at Marcus and asked him if he wanted cake. Even now I remember her tone when she spoke about us. To her, Marcus was our son. I was that girl. Sometimes I would overhear things not meant for my ears. One night when I was supposed to be asleep, I heard my mother whisper, "A son carries the family name. A daughter leaves." That's just how it is. My father grunted in agreement. Those words sank deep into me, like seeds of something bitter that would grow for decades. Marcus knew he was special. Everyone around him made sure of it. He didn't even have to try. He'd skip school, talk back, and still get away with everything. I remember once when he scratched my favorite art notebook with a marker, my father only said, "He's just a kid, Scarlett. Stop overreacting." I was 14. He was 6. It didn't matter his age, excused everything, mine condemned me. As I got older, the difference between us grew clearer. When Marcus turned 16, Dad handed him the keys to a pickup truck, a reward for being a good son. I still remember the shine of the metal and how Marcus smirked at me. Meanwhile, I rode the yellow school bus every day, sitting near the back because the smell of diesel was strongest there, and at least no one would see when I cried quietly against the window. That was my teenage soundtrack. The hum of the bus, the laughter of kids with families who cheered for them, and the quiet, choking sound of my own disappointment. But I wasn't bitter, not yet. I still thought that if I just kept being patient, my parents would finally notice. I imagined they'd see my art exhibit one day, or watch me graduate and say, "We're proud of you, Scarlett." That day never came. When I got into college on a scholarship, my mother only said, "Well, that's good. It saves us money." Meanwhile, my father proudly told everyone that Marcus would be attending one of the most expensive private universities in the state. I overheard him bragging on the phone, $75,000 a year, but worth every penny. He's going places. I smiled when he walked past me that day. He didn't notice. Still, I went to college, worked part-time jobs, and studied art history because I loved it, even if no one else did. My professors said I had potential, but potential doesn't pay rent. After graduation, I couldn't find steady work, so I took what I could, waitressing retail data entry. Marcus thought it was funny. "Guess that fancy degree isn't worth much, huh?" he said once when I stopped by the house. "Nobody needs a walking museum." Mom laughed. Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. That was the last time I went home for a while. But I wasn't ready to give up on life just yet. I was young, determined, and still hopeful that maybe, just maybe, I could create the kind of love I never got growing up. And that's when I met Michael. He came into the coffee shop where I worked every morning, tall with kind eyes and a grin that felt like sunlight after years of rain. I didn't know it then, but that smile would become both my salvation and my downfall. Because for the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw me. Or at least I thought he did. Michael wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. He had this easy charm that made you forget about everything else. He'd joke with the barista compliment strangers and somehow make you feel like the world wasn't such a cold place after all. At first, I thought he was too good to be true. Maybe he was. He started leaving extra tips waiting for me after my shifts, walking me to the bus stop even when it rained. We'd talk about everything, movies, books, dreams. He said I had the kind of eyes that saw more than most people ever would, and I wanted to believe him. After months of dating, we got married quietly. No big wedding, no family celebration. My parents didn't even attend. My mother said she had too much going on with Marcus's graduation, and my father simply said, "Marriage is your choice, not our business." It didn't matter. I thought I was finally free. The first year was good, almost peaceful. We rented a small apartment near downtown. I decorated it with secondhand furniture, painted the walls a soft gray, and filled the kitchen with flowers. Michael would stay up late with me, talking about starting a small business, maybe opening a cafe. I'd smile and imagine a future built with love and hard work, something that belonged to me, not the family that had forgotten me. But dreams are fragile things. After a few months, the cracks began to show. Michael started sleeping late, skipping work interviews, spending hours on his computer. I'm figuring things out. He'd say, his eyes glued to some forum about investments or get-rich schemes. The bills started piling up. I'd come home from double shifts at the real estate agency Jenny helped me get into, only to find empty takeout boxes and video game noises coming from the living room. One night I snapped. "Michael, I can't keep doing everything. I'm exhausted." He didn't even pause the game. "You're acting like the world's ending because I'm taking a break. You're always so serious, Scarlett. Why can't you just relax for once?" Relax. That word haunted me. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn peace, and now the man who promised to share my burdens was calling me uptight. Still, I tried to make it work. I told myself that marriages had rough patches, but deep down I could feel something slipping. Something familiar. The same imbalance I grew up watching between my parents and me. I was once again the one carrying everything, while someone else got to drift freely. Months passed. My commissions were small. Clients seemed to trust more experienced agents. I was barely scraping by, until one day I met the Hendersons, a middle-aged couple looking for a 5-bedroom villa on the coast. They loved my honesty, my patience. When they finally bought the property, my commission was $40,000. I remember staring at that check, my hands shaking. For the first time in years, I felt like I was winning. That night, I showed it to Michael, expecting him to be proud. Instead, his eyes lit up with greed. "Babe, we should get a new car. Something nice. You deserve it. Maybe a sports car. Imagine pulling up to work in one of those." I laughed nervously. "We need to be smart, Michael. Let's save, maybe look for a better apartment. We can't just blow it." His smile faded. "You never want to have fun, do you? You love being miserable." 2 weeks later, I woke up to find $10,000 missing from our joint account. My heart sank. I knew before I even asked. When I confronted him, he didn't even look guilty. "I went to Vegas," he said simply. "I thought I could double it. I just wasn't lucky." "Lucky," I whispered. "You stole from me." "I didn't steal. We're married, remember? What's yours is mine." That night, I packed a bag and walked out. The next day, I filed for divorce. For the first time, I didn't cry. I wasn't broken. I was angry. At him, at my parents, at the world that kept teaching me that love was something I had to beg for. A month later, my anger turned into something else. I missed my period. Then came the test, 2 pink lines staring back at me. Pregnant. I sat in that bathroom for an hour, staring at the stick, my mind blank. My first thought wasn't joy. It was fear. I was alone, barely stable, and the man who should have been by my side was off gambling away other people's money. For a moment, I considered ending it. I even made the appointment. But when I walked into the clinic and heard the faint cry of a baby from another room, my body froze. I walked out before my name was even called. That night, I sat by the window, the city lights flickering like fading stars, and whispered to the tiny life inside me, "I don't know if I'll be enough for you, but I promise I'll never let you feel unwanted." 9 months later, on a quiet Tuesday morning in March, Laya was born. She had dark hair, soft skin, and the calmest little face I'd ever seen. When the nurse placed her in my arms, something inside me healed. All the years of rejection, the loneliness, the bitterness, they all melted away in that one heartbeat. She was perfect. She was mine. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood what it felt like to be loved back. Laya changed everything. The day I brought her home, the apartment felt alive for the first time. There were soft baby cries echoing through the hall, the faint smell of milk, tiny socks drying near the window. I didn't have much, but every corner of that little space felt sacred because it was ours. I worked during the day and stayed up all night watching her sleep, terrified. Something might happen if I closed my eyes. I'd whisper stories to her about the kind of world I wanted her to grow up in, one where people saw her, valued her, loved her simply for existing. The first time I told my parents about Leia, I thought just maybe having a grandchild would melt their coldness. I called and said, "Mom, I had a baby. Her name is Leia." There was silence. Then my mother said flatly, "We'll see her when she turns 2. Babies that young don't remember anyway." I hung up before I cried. So it was me and Laya against the world. I went back to work when she was just 3 months old. My boss thankfully was kind. He let me bring Laya to the office sometimes. When I had property showings, I'd drop her off with a nanny recommended by a client, Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen was in her 50s, soft-spoken patient, and the kind of woman whose smile made you exhale without realizing it. She treated Laya like her own grandchild, humming lullabies in Mandarin while feeding her. Laya adored her. I did too. Between work, sleepless nights, and bills, I was constantly exhausted. But every time Leia smiled that small, sleepy grin with one tiny dimple, I felt alive again. We'd sit on the balcony in the evenings, her bundled in a blanket on my lap, watching the city lights shimmer below. I'd tell her, "Everything I never had, I'll give to you. You'll never wonder if you matter." And for a long while, life felt almost peaceful. Then the coughing started. At first, it was nothing, a few dry coughs at night. I thought it was a cold, maybe the dusty air from the city. But then she started wheezing, gasping, sometimes turning pale for no reason. The first time it happened, we were coloring together. Her crayon slipped from her hand, and she whispered, "Mommy, I can't breathe." Panic. That's the only word that fits. I rushed her to the hospital, holding her small hand as she tried to speak but couldn't. The doctor said it was probably allergies, gave her medicine, and sent us home. But things got worse. She grew tired quickly. Walking to the park made her dizzy. Sometimes she'd faint after playing. I stopped sleeping altogether. Every breath she took sounded like it might be the last. One afternoon, her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called me while I was showing an apartment. "Miss Scarlett, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you should take Leia to a specialist. She had an episode today after stretching in class. She couldn't breathe." I felt my stomach twist. "Is she okay?" "She's stable now, but it didn't look normal. Please get her checked." That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I sat beside Leia's bed, watching her chest rise and fall, so fragile, so slow. My baby, my entire world, and I couldn't protect her. The next morning, we went back to the hospital for a full evaluation. Blood work scans, x-rays, breathing tests. She was terrified but brave, clutching Mrs. Chen's hand while I tried not to cry. When the doctor came back, I could tell from his eyes that it wasn't good news. He was an older man, gentle professional, but there was a heaviness in his voice when he said, "Your daughter has a rare lung disease. It's degenerative. There's no established cure." The words didn't make sense. My mind went blank. "No cure," I repeated. "There has to be something." "There's an experimental treatment," he said. "Still in clinical stages. It has shown promise in some patients, but it's expensive. The first phase alone is nearly $400,000. The number hit me harder than the diagnosis. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. My voice cracked when I whispered, "We'll find a way, whatever it takes." That night, I sat on the edge of Laya's hospital bed while she slept, machines softly beeping around us. I brushed her hair back and whispered, "I promise you'll breathe freely again, my love. I'll find a way, I swear." And I meant it. Over the next weeks, I sold everything, my car, my jewelry, my furniture, even my mother's old sewing machine that I had kept since childhood. Every dollar went toward Laya's treatment. I worked morning to night at the agency and then took data entry jobs until dawn. 18-hour days, no weekends, no sleep. But even after selling nearly everything, I was still $92,000 short. $92,000 stood between my daughter and her life. There was only one place left to turn. The place I had avoided my entire adult life. That night, with trembling hands, I picked up the phone and dialed my parents' number. When my father's voice came through, stern and unfamiliar, my heart nearly stopped. "Dad, it's me. Scarlett." A pause. "What do you need?" I swallowed hard. "Laya's sick. It's bad. She has a rare lung disease. The treatment costs $400,000. I've raised most of it, but I'm still short $92,000. Please, I need help. I'm begging you." There was a silence so long I thought the line had gone dead. Then my father said, his tone cold and measured, "Scarlett, you're an adult now. Be realistic. Your mother and I can't help you. We have our own life to worry about." My voice broke. "You can't or you won't." He repeated flatly, "We don't have it." And then he hung up. For a moment, I just stared at the phone, unable to move. It wasn't the rejection that broke me. It was how familiar it felt. The same old silence, the same cold wall. That night I sat in the dark and whispered to myself, Then I'll save her alone. I had no idea just how much those words would cost me. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat by the window, staring at the lights of the city, feeling like the whole world was moving forward while mine stood still. $92,000, that was all that separated my daughter from another chance to live. I tried everything. I took out more loans, begged charities, sent hundreds of emails to medical foundations and fundraising pages. Some replied with polite rejections. Others ignored me completely. I even started an online campaign with Laya's photo, her tiny body hooked up to tubes, her smile faint but brave. People shared it, donated what they could. I was grateful for every small dollar, but it was never enough. Every minute I wasn't working, I was calling someone, writing another letter, chasing another maybe. Weeks passed in a blur. I barely noticed the world outside until one afternoon I ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store. "Scarlett," she said brightly, "I heard about Marcus's wedding. Your parents must be over the moon." I froze. His wedding. "Oh yes, it's supposed to be extravagant, a full destination event, I think. The whole family's been buzzing about it on Facebook." I managed a smile, but my heart was pounding. As soon as I got home, I opened my laptop for the first time in months. I searched my mother's name. There it was. Post after post of floral arrangements, venues, dress fittings, and then a photo that made my stomach twist. It was a check, made out to a luxury wedding venue, amount $265,000. The caption read, "So proud we can give our son the wedding he's always dreamed of." I stared at it for a long time. $265,000, nearly 3 times what I begged them for, 3 times the price of my daughter's life. That night I screamed. It wasn't anger, it was something deeper, something ancient that clawed out of my chest. All those years of being overlooked, dismissed, unloved, they all came crashing back. I screamed until my voice gave out. Then I cried until there were no tears left. Mrs. Chen found me the next morning sitting on the floor beside the sofa, my eyes swollen. She didn't ask what happened. She just held me. For the first time, I didn't push someone away. But I couldn't stay broken. Laya needed me. So I got up, wiped my face, and went back to work. I borrowed money from places I shouldn't have, loan sharks with cruel smiles and colder hearts. They charged interest that could bleed a person dry, but I didn't care. I just needed that last $92,000. When I finally handed over the payment at the hospital, my hands were shaking. The doctor nodded and began the experimental treatment immediately. For a while there was hope. Laya could breathe a little easier. She even drew me a picture, 2 stick figures holding hands under a sun with uneven rays. She said, "That's us, Mommy, when we can go outside again." I kept that drawing in my bag like a prayer. But a few weeks later, the improvement stopped. She started coughing again. The doctors adjusted the treatment. Her skin turned pale, her body weaker. The nurses began to avoid eye contact with me. I could see it in their faces, pity the kind that comes before bad news. One night I overheard the doctor whispering outside her room. "She's not responding anymore. We'll try another course, but..." His voice faded. I stood there frozen, gripping the wall. I couldn't lose her. I couldn't. Inside, Laya was coloring quietly. She looked up at me and smiled that same soft smile she always had. "Mommy, it's okay. I'm not scared." I knelt beside her bed and took her hand. "You're going to get better. You hear me? You're strong, stronger than me." She giggled faintly. "That's because I'm half you." It broke me. A few days later, the machine started beeping differently. The nurses rushed in. I was pushed aside, forced to watch from the corner as they worked on her. Then suddenly, silence. A nurse whispered something to the doctor. He turned to me, eyes heavy with sorrow. "I'm so sorry." The world went quiet. My body moved on its own. I ran to her bed, cradled her tiny frame, kissed her forehead. Her skin was still warm. I whispered, "Please wake up, baby. Please." She didn't. Laya died on a Thursday afternoon, 2 days before Marcus's wedding. They said her heart just stopped. I didn't believe them. Her heart didn't stop, mine did. I called my parents to tell them. My mother answered, "Mom, Laya's gone." I said, my voice hollow. There was a pause, then she said calmly, "Oh, well, these things happen. When is the funeral?" "Saturday at 2. Saturday." Her voice sharpened. "Scarlett, that's Marcus's rehearsal brunch. You shouldn't spoil his celebration. Can't you move it to another day?" I thought I misheard. "Mom, it's her funeral." She sighed, annoyed. "You should know how to respect your family. Marcus has been planning this for months." I felt something inside me die again. "Then don't come." "We'll see if we can make it," she said coldly and hung up. At the funeral, the sky was gray. Only a few people came: Mrs. Chen, Jenny, and Laya's teachers. I stood there numb, watching as they lowered the coffin into the ground. My parents arrived late. They stood at the back, checked their watches, and didn't shed a tear. When everyone left, my mother approached me. "We need to go," she said. "The wedding band is giving us trouble." I didn't speak. I couldn't. She left, and I watched their car drive away. Mrs. Chen stayed behind. She placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. She knew she was loved, she whispered. "That's all that matters now." That night I sat alone beside Laya's empty bed. I touched her pillow, still soft from where her head used to rest. And I made a promise, one that would take me 5 years to fulfill. "You were my whole heart, my miracle. They buried you once, but I'll make sure they pay for doing it twice." Grief isn't loud the way people think it is. It's not endless crying or screaming. It's the sound of silence in a house that used to hum with life. It's waking up at 3 a.m. because you think you heard your child breathing, only to realize it's the wind. It's setting the table for two and stopping yourself halfway through. After Laya's funeral, I stopped existing in the world. I moved through my days like a ghost. Work didn't matter. Food didn't matter. Nothing did. Mrs. Chen stayed with me for weeks. She'd bring me tea, cook small meals I never touched, and quietly fold Laya's clothes into boxes. Sometimes I'd catch her wiping away tears when she thought I wasn't looking. My parents never called. Not once. A few days after the funeral, I received a message from my mother. It was a photo. Marcus and his new wife, smiling beneath a shower of white petals. The caption read, "The happiest day of our lives." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I laughed, the kind of laugh that hurts your throat. My daughter had been dead less than a week, and for them it was the happiest day of their lives. That was when something inside me shifted. My grief hardened into something sharper. I didn't want revenge, yet I wanted justice. Over the following months, I paid the remaining debts to the loan sharks. Every check I wrote was like cutting open an old wound. But I didn't care. It gave me a purpose, something to focus on when everything else felt meaningless. Years went by, 5 of them. 5 years of silence. 5 years of rebuilding what was left of my life. I changed apartments, moved across the city where nobody knew my story. I kept working in real estate, climbing slowly until I became one of the agency's top brokers. My clients loved me. They said I had a calm energy, that I made them feel safe. If only they knew where that calm came from losing everything, from learning that nothing lasts forever. Mrs. Chen still visited every Sunday. We'd sit on my balcony, sip tea, and talk about Laya. She loved drawing suns, Mrs. Chen would say, smiling softly, always with too many rays. She said each ray was a wish I'd reply. Jenny stayed close too. She never asked about my parents, and I was grateful. Their names became like poison in my mouth, something I refused to taste again. I thought I had buried that part of my life completely. Until one afternoon my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something in me knew. I almost didn't answer. "Scarlett," a familiar voice said. I froze. "Dad?" "Yes," he sighed. "It's your father. We need to talk." Every muscle in my body tensed. "How did you get this number?" "That doesn't matter. Your mother and we need help." I almost laughed. "Help? You need my help." His voice trembled slightly, the first sign of weakness I'd ever heard from him. "The company I worked for went bankrupt. We lost everything: savings, retirement, even the house is in danger. We need $95,000 to save it." 95,000. 3,000 more than what I had begged for to save Leia's life. I felt something icy settle in my chest. "You're joking." "I wouldn't call if it wasn't serious," he said. "We're family, Scarlett. Families help each other." I closed my eyes. His words echoed, twisted, reshaped into the ones I'd once heard 5 years ago. "You're an adult now. Be realistic." Now suddenly I was family again. "Why should I help you?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because we raised you. We gave you a home." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You didn't raise me. You tolerated me. You gave me 4 walls, not a home." "Scarlett, please," he said, his voice cracking. "We'll lose everything." For the first time in years, I smiled, not out of joy, but clarity. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of timing. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll give you the money." He exhaled in relief. "Thank you, sweetheart. I knew." But I interrupted. "There are conditions." "Conditions?" "Yes. You and Mom will publicly admit what you did. You'll post it for the world to see that you refused to help me when Laya was dying. That you paid $265,000 for Marcus's wedding while your granddaughter was in a hospital bed." "Scarlett, that's absurd," he snapped. "We can't." "Then you don't get the money," I said calmly. "And there's one more thing." "What?" "After you post the truth, you'll sign a legal document ending all contact with me. Forever. No calls, no messages, no visits. You stopped being my parents in every way that matters. There was silence. I could hear his shallow breathing through the phone. Finally, he whispered, "You're being cruel." "No," I said, "I'm being fair." He didn't respond. When the call ended, I stood by the window staring at the night sky. For years, I'd imagined what it would feel like to confront them. I thought it would bring rage tears, something explosive. But instead, there was only calm. The same calm I had felt the night I made the decision to keep Leia alive as long as I could. A week later, they came to my office. They looked smaller, older, defeated. My father's suit hung loose on him. My mother's hands trembled as she clutched her purse. She wouldn't look at me. The documents were on the table. I'd already written the statement for them. All they had to do was sign and post it. It read, "We, Robert and Ann Miller, gave our son $265,000 for his wedding while refusing to help our daughter Scarlett pay for treatment that could have saved her child Leia. We chose pride over compassion, and we live with that choice." They signed it in silence. My mother's tears fell onto the paper, smearing the ink. For once, I didn't feel sorry for her. Then they signed the second document, the legal termination of contact. I handed my father the check. "This is the last thing you'll ever get from me." They walked out without another word. As the door closed behind them, I turned to the photo on my desk, Laya's photo smiling in her hospital gown, her hand raised in a little wave. I whispered, "It's done, my love. They finally paid something." But deep down, I knew I wasn't finished. Justice hadn't been served yet, not truly. Not until the world knew everything. I thought seeing them sign those papers would be enough. Watching their names stain a confession, seeing my mother's hands tremble, my father's pride crumble, I thought that would finally silence the storm inside me. It didn't. For days after, I felt empty. The anger was gone, but so was everything else. I'd spent 5 years living with the weight of what they'd done, and when it lifted, I didn't know who I was without it. Then I looked at the photo on my desk, Leia in her little hospital bed, one hand raised like she was waving from somewhere far away. And I knew. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside was every piece of proof I had kept, not because I planned to use it, but because part of me refused to let history be rewritten. Screenshots of my mother's Facebook posts about Marcus's wedding, the photo of the $265,000 check, hospital bills with my signature at the bottom, text messages from my parents refusing to help, a copy of Laya's death certificate, and the message my mother sent me from the wedding, the happiest day of our lives. Every word, every image told the same story, the one they had buried right alongside my daughter. I stared at the folder for a long time. Then, without hesitation, I wrote a letter. It was 10 pages long, typed carefully, every word deliberate. I told the story from the beginning, not as a daughter begging for sympathy, but as a mother who wanted the truth remembered. I included everything, the calls, the refusal, the wedding, the funeral, the confession. And when it was done, I sent it to Aunt Caroline. Caroline was my mother's sister, the one person in the family who had always shown me a little kindness. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but I knew 2 things about her. She had a good heart, and she had a big mouth. When she called me the next morning, her voice shook. "Scarlett," I read it all. "My God, is this true?" Every word I said quietly. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then in a tone that sounded both furious and heartbroken, she said, "They'll regret this. I promise you." And she kept that promise. By the end of the week, my parents' secret wasn't a secret anymore. Caroline had forwarded my letter to the entire family group chat, to my parents' church committee, to their yacht club, to every friend and neighbor they had. She didn't just whisper it, she broadcast it. And the world responded exactly as I knew it would. Their friends stopped answering calls. People they had known for decades crossed the street to avoid them. The church removed them from their volunteer board. Even Marcus's in-laws, that picture-perfect family they had tried to impress, were disgusted. Marcus himself called me, his voice filled with fury. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. I didn't flinch. I told the truth. "You've ruined their lives." "They ruined mine," I said softly. "And Laya's." There was a long silence, then he hissed, "You're sick," and hung up. But I didn't feel sick. For the first time, I felt steady. Weeks later, I heard from Aunt Caroline again. "They've become pariahs," she said. "No one talks to them." The club revoked their membership. Marcus's wife moved out for a while. He's furious at them, blames them for everything. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. I just felt still. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the window, I sat at my desk, looking through the old photos of Laya. In one of them, she was laughing so hard her eyes were squeezed shut, her small teeth showing sunlight catching in her hair. I whispered, "They can't hurt you anymore." Mrs. Chen came by the next day as she always did. She brought flowers, yellow tulips, Laya's favorite. "She'd be so proud of you," Mrs. Chen said gently. I smiled faintly, for what I didn't win anything. "You kept your promise," she said. "You made sure she was remembered." That night, I drove to the cemetery. It was late, the city lights faint behind me, the road slick from the rain. I parked under the old oak tree and walked to her grave, flowers in hand. The headstone was simple: Laya Miller, 2014-2021. Loved beyond measure. I knelt arranging the tulips beside it. The air smelled like wet earth and lilacs from the garden nearby. "Hi, baby," I whispered. "I'm sorry it took me this long." I told her everything about the letter. The confession, the way people finally saw the truth. About how Marcus's perfect world had cracked. About how her grandparents, the ones who chose money over mercy, were now living with the very emptiness they gave to us. I brushed my hand over the stone. "It's over now. You can rest." The wind stirred gently, and for a second I thought I heard her laugh, that little giggle that used to echo through our home. I stayed there until the sky turned pale gray, until the sun began to rise. Before I left, I whispered one last thing. "You were my beginning and my end, Laya, and now, maybe I can start again." I turned, walked back to the car, and didn't look back. A few months passed after the truth came out. I didn't check social media, didn't answer calls, didn't want to hear the aftermath, but it found me anyway. People from my old neighborhood whispered, sent me screenshots. My parents had become a story. Not a tragedy, not martyrs, just a cautionary tale. The couple who chose a wedding over a child's life. That's what people called them. They couldn't walk into a cafe without hearing the whispers. Their so-called friends avoided them in public. My father stopped going to church. My mother deleted all her social media, but not before strangers filled her posts with comments. "How could you? You don't deserve forgiveness." Marcus's wife left with their baby for a while. Her family, who once flaunted their connection to my parents, now refused to speak their names. Marcus tried to call me again 3 times. I never picked up. What could he possibly say? I heard through Aunt Caroline that my parents still lived in their big suburban house. The curtains were always drawn, the lawn overgrown, the mailbox overflowing with junk mail. The house that once hosted dinner parties and baby showers was now quiet, dark hollow. It was exactly what they had made my childhood home feel like. Sometimes I wondered if they finally understood what it felt like to be invisible. One morning, while sorting through old files at work, I came across a worn envelope. Inside was one of Leia's last drawings, 2 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. Beneath it, in her shaky handwriting, "Mommy plus me, always." I sat there staring at it for a long time. The edges were smudged, probably from the day she gave it to me in the hospital. For years I had carried that picture as a reminder of what I lost. But now it felt different. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was proof that love, even small and fleeting, had existed in its purest form. That night I visited her grave again. Mrs. Chen couldn't come. She wasn't feeling well, so I went alone. The air was cold, the kind that makes you pull your coat tighter, but the sky was clear. The city lights shimmered faintly in the distance. I knelt down, placed the drawing beside the tulips, and whispered, "They know now, sweetheart. Everyone knows. They paid their price." The breeze rustled the trees. For a moment I thought I felt her presence warm like sunlight touching my cheek. "Do you forgive me," I asked softly, "for not saving you in time?" Of course there was no answer, but somehow the silence felt gentle. I stayed there until the moon climbed high. I told her about my work, about Jenny's promotion, about Mrs. Chen's new cat. I even told her about a client I'd met recently, a quiet man named David, who'd lost his wife years ago. We'd been talking more often, sharing stories of loss, not as broken people searching for healing, but as survivors, learning how to breathe again. As I spoke, I realized something: maybe healing didn't mean forgetting. Maybe it meant living fully while remembering. When I stood to leave, I looked up at the night sky and whispered, "You'll never be forgotten, my love. You're in everything I do." A week later, Aunt Caroline called again. Her voice carried that same mix of pity and satisfaction. "Scarlett, I thought you should know your parents sold the house. They're moving to some small town. No one wanted to buy from them at first, but eventually someone offered half the price." "Half," I said quietly. "That seems fair." "They have nothing left," she added softly. "No friends, no reputation, just each other." For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel vindicated. I just felt done. They'll live with their choices, I said. That's enough. Caroline hesitated. You're not going to reach out. I smiled faintly. They already got what they asked for silence. That night, I walked to my balcony, poured myself a glass of wine, and let the city sounds wash over me. The laughter from the streets, the faint honking of cars, life continuing as it always does. I thought about all the versions of myself that had died along the way. The little girl who begged for love, the woman who begged for help, the mother who begged for mercy. And I realized they were gone, but I was still here. I closed my eyes and whispered, You see, Laia, we survived. You and me. In the reflection of the glass door, I could see the photo of her on the wall behind me. Her smile frozen in time, the same smile that once lit up a hospital room. You were never forgotten, I said. The people who erased you erased themselves instead. The city lights flickered below, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel: peace. Not triumph, not revenge, just peace. And in that silence, I finally understood justice wasn't about punishment. It was about remembrance. Justice at last isn't revenge, it's remembrance.